All right, thank you all, Valerie, Stephen, and Evan, and Lea. Thank you for agreeing for this interview, and thank you to the elders of this land, past, present, and future. I'd just like to thank the Daru elders, and welcome. So today we just wanted to talk about a few topics on Lemuria and Atlantis, and the connection with Australia, and the divine feminine or matriarchal energies that are coming back after the prophecy. So yeah, anyone wants to start off with any of those topics? Or?
Well, since it's a feminine thing, wouldn't one of the ladies be leading off before us, being mere males in this occasion?
I'm not very feminine.
Okay then, that's the case.
Or Atlantean, whatever you guys want to talk about, really.
Yeah, well, I guess it's, well, I mean, in regards to, all right, so just as you are all well aware that I have memories of a previous life in Atlantia, lived my life as an Atlantean, lived through it during a time when it was declining, where basically it collapsed in on itself and created kind of like a social and political and vacuum, as well as an energetic vacuum, as well as a, planetary vacuum, but that's, that's to be later discussed. But yeah, we, the way we sort of structured our society, we did have it. The thing is, like, a lot of people tend to talk about a lot of these older, more spiritual civilizations who have a very strong spiritual base to be typically more matriarchal. Now, Atlantia or Atlantean civilization was did have very strong matriarchal ties. It started off that way, but then it eventually kind of equated between both sexes to like an equal power in my time anyway. So it was interesting because, like, we never really had like a patriarchal system, but it was I guess women were given more preferential treatment in those really early days, and then of course my life in that time, it was far more equal, which was always good, I guess. But yeah, so there were, and if I'm on the, I don't like the idea of having, one particular sex to be more dominant than the other or anything. Like, this constant sort of gender power play is very exhausting and has been going on since day one. And yeah, Atlanteans were certainly not 100% free of that, but they're getting better, and I hope one day we'll get better too. So, there you go. That's my little piece.
Can I add to that, Lea? I think what you have said is very interesting. Actually, I could say that there were three of us actually came together that were from Andromeda, and they were telling and talking 6,000 years into our future. So we were doing work for something like 9 years, and a lot of the work was communicating with a person or a being that was connected to me, I suppose, but I'm just an aspect of who they were. But it was 6,000 years in our future. So they're speaking from how it was now, really, but even before. I'm sort of saying this because we had a name given to us, which was Jalam, and it's pronounced Yalam. And also with some of the information we were giving in the early days, these Atlanteans, and I'm not sure if this fits with you, Lea, but they told us that they came to the planet Earth 300,000 years ago. And that sounds quite a stretch, but they, if you can think about the plateau of consciousness here on this planet, it operates now at third dimensional, if you like. And I think scientists accept the word dimension. Well, it's fallen in. They talk about the fall of Atlantis. But before that, it was much higher and much easier for the star people to come and go. And so they used to come and go onto the planet Earth, all down through those 300,000 years. And there are a lot of people that stayed, or some just came and went, just visited. So I don't know if anybody has heard this kind of conversation. There was another time 200,000 years ago that another group, I think, came from Arcturus. Again, it was always not harming, just living, and sort of would explain why there's a lot of very advanced technology and scientists just can't put their finger on it. But after the fall, the planet was in such a disarray. It was quite, I think Lea may have spoken about that. Have you spoken about that before, Lea? About the fall of Atlantis?
I have, yeah, and it was, well, it tied into when I died in that time. So I knew I guess you could say the stage of why it fell. It's a little bit more complicated than just like, you know, I don't have all the answers in the sense of like, you know, there was a lot more that was going on than what was seen on the surface. But what we had was like, it was quite heavily corrupt, and people were complacent, and some people just weren't aware, and which was ironic because you had this whole civilization that prided itself on being psychic and being very, very psychically adept, to be so ignorant to what was going on around, because they, you after a while, what you start to believe your own stuff. You just see like, oh yeah, I can do anything, I'll be fine. And then, you don't actually, you stop kind of looking around what's happening in the corner. So around the corner. So yeah, it got to a point where just people, a combination of things, people stopped caring, people stopped paying attention. And yeah, that was, but the problem was that I don't want to blame people for it. Like, I mean, there's no one person responsible is what I'm saying. No one particular group. It was a collective effort for annihilation. So, yeah. But my life, I lived in it in a sense. I was very connected with the civilization, the society. Was very, I was very much so a participant, and I saw some things. I saw some issues that I didn't raise with some people, some inconsistencies, and I never thought to bring it up because it's not nice to talk about.
No, I understand. Yes. So what I was thinking about also was when the earth was an absolute mess. It fell into, shall we say, it's like Jacob talks about the ladder and it goes down. We fell into a lower dimension. And from that point, anybody that survived would at least, the consciousness is lowered as well, and they can't think the same as they used to or do the same things they were capable of. And so so that was given to us. I remember working with an Aboriginal healer, Jerry, and he was wonderful, actually. He can remember being Indigenous, shall we say, Lemurian at that time, and he can remember looking up the sky, and he knew that there were two moons. There has been talk about two moons, and he said he could see one collapsing, coming to the earth and collapsing. And so that has been spoken about by others that have memory. And that actually hit so hard. It set off a transition of change all around the planet. There were earthquakes, there was water disappearing from where it used to be, or earth coming up where it never was, all those type of things, and probably the mountains, all that. And so it was such a disarray that the whole of the planet was in a mess. A lot of the star people that were here on Earth just left went home, whereas the ones that survived stayed and lived the best they could, which was in caves or where there were places to be safe. But there was an ice age as well, and it was a long time before the Earth could really recover. I have actually read a book that a lot of work and study was done about it, because the geologists, shall we say, or scientists, if they don't understand that was what was happened, it's very easy to get confused about dating or carbon dating, because new and or old dating was intermixed and mixed up. And I do have reference to the people that worked with that. And it is probably why there's so much confusion about dating, perhaps. But the hierarchy, from where we have come to understand, they actually had to create the net that already around the planet that was holding our atmosphere. It had to be tightened so that the energy of the disarray that was going on, it was so bad, they didn't want it to interfere with the solar system and the rest of the galaxy for that matter. And so they had to tighten it. And so from then on, which isn't that long ago in evolutionary terms, that the net is actually starting to be loosened. And when they talk about stargates opening, they're meaning where the net crosses over, you know, like that. Yeah, and the light, the new light that's coming onto this planet is actually helping to ring changes and to raise the consciousness of the Earth. That's why there's so much more seen now by the archaeologists where they couldn't see it before. So does that ring a bell with you? That all that kind of talk? Or
the thinning of planes, like is that what you mean? Like the veil between both plane what we would consider to be physical plane, thinning and interacting with planes just beyond and below it. Is that what you mean? Like how things are kind of loosening up in
yes, that's right.
space. Yeah.
Well, I've been given a lot of understanding lately of Nikola Tesla's work, and he talks about the universe. If you want to know about the universe, he says, look at the energy, the vibration, and the frequency. And a lot more people are coming out and talking about it now, even though Tesla wasn't accepted too well 75 years ago. Now they're starting to understand more. And so that's what I mean about a plane or dimension. It's a plane that we seem to operate. There's no clear divisive line, but there is a definite plateau, I should say, or a level playing field where certain people can communicate very easily, or others have more difficulty, like the star people. That's why they use people as yourself, you know, to come through and borrow your voice box to speak or share their message, because wherever they are, they mostly all of them use telepathy or mind-to-mind consciousness, and they just don't speak, or if they have a voice, it's different. It's working at a different layer of consciousness. So does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from what I've been well, here's the thing. What my education from ETs and what I understand, what they tell me in the instruction, sometimes is not always the same thing, because I still have a physical brain that needs to compartmentalize and comprehend what is being taught. Now, having X amount of decades of interacting, I think I'm getting there to understanding what they mean, but it's still not there. Like I'm still way off. But in regards to the so the way they talk about these multiple planes, they talk about it as it's like a frequency, like a rainbow frequency, you know, one color shifting into another one until you get to the opposite end, which is a completely different shade from when it started. So they talk about the planes in that way, and the frequencies of said planes, and they all vibrate differently. They all operate differently.
Exactly.
We don't just, when every being sits, they say it like they sit in more than just one of these frequencies. They all vibrate in more than just one of these places. They have the ability to interact with more than one of these planes within that little bracket on the rainbow spectrum. Now, ability, here's another thing, the ability, sometimes some of these beings, like for humans, we can probably sit to like, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a number out there, like 3 planes or 3 frequencies, right? Whereas some ETs can hit like 12 or, you know, like 50 or 1,000, some of them can just choose which one they want to materialize in, and they want to detect and have to them a physical interaction. Now, what we would consider to be physical is just physical through our perception. For some other planes and beings of some other planes, this is astral. So you've got to, there's no right or wrong answer with this one. It's basically like, you know, it's like, what's the biggest number in the universe, or what's the smallest number? So it's just, it's all perspective thing. Now, when they were talking a bit about how some beings can sit in some frequencies, being able to be aware or having some sense, having, how do you call it, sensory detection of these other planes is also possible. Like sometimes it's usually more than 3, or it could be like 4 or 5 or 6. Now, it's not impossible for human, and this is what they would consider psychic stuff, like being able to detect more than just a physical sense of where the plane that they're currently inhabiting. So you have the higher senses which operate and vibrate on a much more malleable frequency, like, you know, you have your third eye, which can essentially like change to whichever frequency. Because in my experience, when I would be using my third eye, I have to switch like which lens I want to use. So do I want to see auras, or do I want to see, like, I don't know, astral objects or matter or something like that? It's a constant switch, and the third eye is capable of seeing all of these things, but yeah, you just have to tell it what you want it to see. So yeah, and still not quite there yet, but I'm getting there.
That's all about what it's all about, actually. It's about intent and focus. And so there's no, when they say that everything's happening at once, that makes sense. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Even with time as well, it switches between time. It's not just planes; you've got timelines as well. But that's a whole other. I don't even want to talk about time. Time sucks. like time's so shit. Like, I don't want to deal with it.
We've got another galaxy. Right.
But yeah. What about you guys? Tell me your stories about having to detect multiple energies at the same time.
I can relate to it. Yeah, I can't do it.
Yeah. Probably differently. In one respect, one of the things I was thinking about with this is that both you guys are talking about Atlantis and Lemuria, and we all do. But the big drawback has always been the same thing. That if you go to something like Wikipedia, you'll find that Atlantis and Lemuria are mythical. And you're going to find in mainstream, even when they put them on superhero shows, they're still regarded as being mythical. And while they are mythical, there's a deliberate disconnect there. Because they're mythical, they're a legend, and therefore they're a fantasy, and it doesn't mean they're true. And to me, it's quite interesting how mainstream have managed to engineer a narrative where primarily mainstream people would think that basically all the things you were saying are incorrect because it doesn't exist. So I think it's clever in one respect. And there's a thing about Atlantis too, because I think I said this earlier today in the other interview we did. I think it's very important people understand there is a huge difference between Atlantis and Lemuria.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a huge difference between the two of them. And I find it fascinating. I'm going to use a quote I used this morning, and I can't remember. I only read it a couple of days ago, and we're putting an article up tomorrow about the Atlantis rings and the Lemurian rings, aren't we? And it was this. With Atlantis, what they said is glance but never stare. And John Anthony West, I didn't only found out today, said the goddamn Atlantis, he was getting sick of it. To an extent, I agree with both of them. I think Atlantis is a very dangerous path to walk down. Lea knows at the finish, the whole place was blown up, and it was some sort of energy wave that came through. Was that right? That was the first thing that took it out?
Yeah.
But we all know one thing about Atlantis. We may not know where, but we know one thing, that it fell on its own sword. And I think that's really the important part of this narrative, that people can talk about Atlantis and they can talk about the fact that it had fantastic technology. And you spoke, Leah, about crystal technology, didn't you? And they misused that. Like we've misused fossil technology. There's no real difference in the narrative. What I keep thinking is this: you don't need to look for Atlantis. It's all around you. It exists everywhere today.
Yeah.
We've got to look at not how it started. And I accept the fact that I believe, like Bob said this morning, was correct about the fact that there was Lemuria, and then people went from there to different places, to Avalon and to Atlantis, and they started different civilizations with different ways of doing things. And I get that. But through personal experience would be correct, wouldn't it, Evan?
Yeah, that
Because we've got the Atlantean rings, and I've had them on my fingers. I've got one on my finger now. And I've got to know them at a different level. And my dealings with Atlantis are much more guarded, as you know, Leah. We've dealt with the rings trying to kill both me and Evan. I've got a ring at the moment, and I mentioned this morning, a ring that we've got, that when it first came in, it invited both Evan and Del to wear the ring.
Yeah, it's the only one that's kind of gone, hey, you put me on, and I'm like, ooh, and I almost reached out to touch it. I haven't had that experience with any of the others.
We've got hundreds of artifacts at home. Honestly, we've got so many artifacts, you can't count them. And Del had the same reaction. And anyway, we did some research on that, and I've got a way of asking these rings, and they'll answer me with yes, no answers. And yes, it did ask them to come there. Then I asked the Lemurian ring, because the Lemurian ring had a real issue with my first Atlantean ring. Couldn't stand it, and they didn't like each other for a long time. It's been a big issue. But the Lemurian rings never lie. Now, what we found out was, yeah, it certainly was asking both. And then I asked the ring, I asked the Lemurian ring, then the Atlantean ring, if they touched it, what would happen? It's quite open about it. They both die. Wanted to kill them both. But I still wear this ring because it's got a good side to it, whereas the other ring had lost its good side. It was completely evil. So what I'm getting at is I accept the fact that Atlantis started with high ideals and great ideas, but Evan and I and our family have dealt with the fall that Leah speaks about and the reasons why there was a fall. And I think it's really important we understand that there is a fundamental difference between Atlantis and Lemuria. And it goes something like this. Yes, psychic conditions, telepathy was something that was the first language around the planet. And the Tower of the Babel we read in the Bible is a metaphor for what took place. But as the years went on, that's an interesting, I think Wirichen called it a party trick, didn't he?
Yeah.
A black fellow we know, original people can do all that stuff today. That's not an issue. We know Kana can do that. But it was a great party trick, but at that stage, Lemuria had built an army, was subjugating other groups. There was a form of slavery that Leah's told me about that took place within that, and it was falling down into the same trough we are today. So I think we've got to be very careful, because what we found with these rings is, when we analyse them, we've got 3 Lemurian rings, we've got 2 Atlantean rings, and we've got a comparative base from the only store of orichalcum that's ever been found on this planet. Now, orichalcum is synonymous with Atlantis. In fact, if you go to the wonderful reference, Wikipedia, which is always full of the most intelligent things, isn't it, Evan?
We're talked of fondly.
Oh, yes, they love us. When you go there, you'll find out it's very clear that Atlantis and orichalcum, which is the metal of Atlantis, are mythical. Orichalcum doesn't exist anywhere on the planet. It's a blend of 5 elements, and it doesn't exist anywhere else. Now, we've got these rings. We've got the rings. We've had them analysed. We've had the Lemurian rings analysed. And it's become very obvious to me there's 3 grades of orichalcum. The one the Romans were using for coins, which is the base one, the more refined one that the Atlanteans used, and the far more refined one that the Lemurians used. And all of them use one major element, which is copper. Now, why do they use copper? because copper is the only metal, if you put it on your skin, you'll absorb it. So the copper is the way that the whole of the magic comes into your system through a very obvious scientific process, because as you know, you get that green ring on your finger. That is the copper coming into your system. And Valerie, you'd remember way back in the past, before the pharmaceutical companies got involved in arthritis, what did everyone wear around their bangles if they had arthritis?
Yeah.
Copper bangles. Why? Because they worked. And there's studies done, and I've read them. They did work, but the pharmaceutical companies said, oh, that's ridiculous. Use this drug, it's much better. It wasn't. So it's very important we get the difference between the two. And what I can say is that the people who don't believe that these places exist, well, we've got the science now, and we've got the chemical readouts to prove that it does exist. And I want to share with you very quickly 2 examples so that when we continue this progress, this conversation, I'm worried that people will think, well, you're giving me all these stories, but where's the empirical fact that quells my rational mind? So I wanted to do that now before we get into Lemuria, to make people understand it does exist. Because some people have been to school. And when you go to school, you are conditioned. You're not taught to question, you're taught to accept. And I know that when you go to school, when you go to university, these places are still mythical. So I want to just discuss with, or just share with you, the readings which are going up tomorrow of 2 things found in 2 Lemurian rings that basically mean they're true. Now, this is one of the rings we've got at the moment. This one here has got orichalcum in it. This one is purely orichalcum with one thing added. All Lemurian rings have tin in. But this one is purely orichalcum plus tin, so I'm not going to talk about that one. What I am going to talk about is the other 2. Now, if we look at the first Lemurian ring, which Roz has at the moment, it's got the same elements, the copper and the zinc that orichalcum has. It's got the iron, it's got the lead like orichalcum, but it doesn't have the nickel that was taken out. And what was put in was something quite unusual, titanium. Now, people need to understand titanium was discovered in 1796 by William Gregory. And according to Wikipedia, and we can't argue with that, was, and I'll use quotation marks around this, was first used in a laboratory in 1932, okay? Now, what does titanium do? Titanium has got the highest density to strength ratio of any element on the planet. So what it does is if you've got 24 karat gold, which is incredibly malleable, you put less than 1% titanium and it makes it rock hard. It's harder than 14 karat gold straight away just by doing that. That's less than 1%. The titanium in this one is 1.15%. And the reason it's in there is because the first ring has the highest lead content of any of the rings. All the other rings were around 2% down to 0.02%. This one is 8.8%. Now, what that does to the integrity of the metal is it weakens it. So that's why the titanium was put in. Now, this ring, if I hold it up and I'll try, you might see when you look at around this side, the ring is actually wearing away. It's eroding. And it was originally all coloured in brown. There was no gold on it at all. I rubbed it off. And we didn't know it was the same as orichalcum until I rubbed it off. And that's why they all got analysed. Now, here's the problem. Angkor Wat was discovered in 1825. The rings were stolen. I know who they were stolen by now. They were stolen by Cambodians and taken to Thailand. It wasn't by the Vietnam vets. They sold it for money. Okay, so it comes out of Angkor Wat, found in 1825. That's about 29 years after it was discovered, but not put into anything yet. Now, here's the problem. What's it doing inside the ring? The ring's thousands of years old, but we didn't have this technology until around about 80, 90 years ago. So what is it doing inside a ring at that proportion, higher than what we put in 24 karat gold? That doesn't make sense from any book or university, because I will tell you, no, we didn't use titanium then. Well, we did. Now, what's really interesting is the Lemurian ring number 3. Now, it's got an amazing setup. It's got the lowest copper and the highest zinc. It's got 35.31% zinc. What does that do to the integrity of the whole thing? Weakens it again. So what did they put in this time? Not titanium this time. They picked a different element. And this is what amazes me. They could have stumbled on one of these elements accidentally, but not twice. What they chose this time was chromium, which is the second best density to strength ratio and also nearly as non-corrosive as the titanium is. Now, why did they put it in? Because the zinc had weakened the integrity of the ring, so they put that in to harden it. So what we have in Lemuria is this: an alchemist that makes a ring and puts it together. And by the way, there is no deposit of orichalcum in the world. What we've worked out is this alchemist takes the elements and mixes it together, because every one of these readouts is different to every other one, but they have the same elements. The variation can be 30% for copper, 20% for zinc. All of them vary all over the place. And this occasion, they put in 0.717% chromium, and that way it kept its integrity. So when these three rings were buried in the temple grounds of Angkor Wat, and they're all coated in this brown to protect it, the two rings that did have a weakness, a structural weakness, what they put in there, the alchemist knew this, and then used two elements that we only just discovered and used in any form of manufacture in the 20th century. But here we are going back 5, 10, 15,000 years, and they are using elements we didn't know about. So I've got to ask a question from a scientific viewpoint before you ladies go back to the channeling, which I don't argue with because you're right. I want the people to understand that the chemistry of those rings denies the fact that it's a fake, because there is no way in the world any of the narratives, mainstream narratives about where we came from, includes chromium and titanium being melted. And by the way, I need 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit to melt these elements. So I need a decent oven for starters. Then I want an alchemist that understands these elements that we've never discovered till recently. What does that tell me? It tells me that the technology that made these rings is superior to what we had until the 20th century. So that means there were earlier civilizations that were at least as advanced as we were in the 1930s, but there's other stuff. It's far more advanced than we've ever been. Because what they've done is they put the chemistry together, and here's the tricky part for those people who don't believe in that, because we've given you some science, and the magic goes inside that. And the carrier is the copper. So what we're finding here is that when people talk about those places, they call it mythical. But let me share something with you, and I mentioned this morning. Well, let's go back to Wikipedia, where it tells us it's mythical. As it says that, underneath there, in the same post, is a picture of what they call orichalcum. I want you to remember, they said it's mythical. And there it is in front of you, a picture of it. It's been analysed, and it was found in a 6th century BC Roman galleon that sunk near Sicily, and they found it in 2016. And they analysed it. And lo and behold, when Plato told us in the 4th century BC that orichalcum was made of copper, zinc, iron, nickel, and lead, guess what was in there? Those 5 things. So what we can work out from that is, how did Plato know what was in the Sicilian orichalcum and know every element in there in the 4th century BC? He didn't reclaim the boat because it was still down there until 2015. And more to the point, how can it be mythical if they've got ingots of it and they've analysed it and it's exactly what Plato said it was? So what you're starting to find is that when Pliny the Elder said in the 1st century DC that the mines were exhausted, they were. The other part you've got to remember is this. They then said that the orichalcum was Roman because it was in a Roman galleon. There's a problem with that because unfortunately, Wikipedia didn't have a deep think about this, did they? No. That's like saying this. We send the iron ore to Japan, they make it into a car, they put it on a boat and it sinks. And they pick the car up and they say, oh, it was made in Japan from Japanese material. No, it was forged in Japan, but it was made with our material. Now, the difference is here. The orichalcum ingots were in the boat sailing to Rome because there's no orichalcum there, and they didn't make it. Pliny said they never made it. What it also means, it was already made. They were taking what was pre-made, which means one of two things. It was made somewhere else, so it can't be Roman. Or it was made by the Atlanteans and they found it and brought it back, so it can't be Roman. The only thing it can't be is Roman because there's no orichalcum there. So what they found is not Roman. So I'm afraid Wikipedia made a mistake, didn't they?
And also, I'd like to mention one more thing, that the Romans were notorious for stealing things. So,
thank you. That's what they did. That was their skill in pillaging and taking from others and bringing it back to Rome, which is what they were doing. So I'm afraid I might be a little bit harsh on Wikipedia at the moment because they've got the whole damn thing wrong. They start by calling it mythical. Then they show us a picture of the mythical thing with the chemical readout and tell us this is what orichalcum is made from. But they're wrong. They're wrong because what they had, and we've looked at that readout, which is 75% greater copper, less than 20% zinc, and 5 to 10% trace elements, is not like the readouts of either the Atlantean rings or the Lemurian rings. They're different in different ways. For example, with the Atlantean rings, the trace elements make up 0.5%. With the ingots, it's 5 to 10%. So when Wikipedia think, oh, well, they're all from Rome, what they've got is not the same as what the Atlanteans were using there, because theirs is 10 to 20 times less in trace elements. And by the way, with both of those, with the Atlantean ones, it's 75% for Sicily, it's 73% for the first ring, which is below that, and for the second one, it's 91%, which is above their highest level. So neither of those fit in. And for the second part, the zinc in the second one is 7%, and theirs were around 20%, and in the first ring, it's 25%. They don't fit. None of the numbers fit. The same elements are there, and you've got to remember that when Homer spoke about this and when Pliny the Elder spoke about it and Plato, they didn't give percentages. They just said, this is the order. It's the same order every time. So we have orichalcum in Atlantis at what I would call the second level. Then when you go to the third level, you're going to find chromium and titanium and very, very clever mixes. And for those who still don't believe this could be true, let me share with you two more statistics. With the Lemuria Ring 2 and 3, I'm going to share two things with you. The combined content of copper and zinc in Lemuria Ring 2 is 95.22%. The combined copper and zinc in 3 is 95.25%. Coincidence that they got it that close. But the tin in both those rings is 1.12% both times. What are the chances these two rings had exactly the same amount of tin to 3 decimal points and had exactly the same amount of copper and zinc to 2 decimal points before there's a variation of 0.03% between them? And can I also share with you the amount of nickel in both of them? In the first one, it's at 0.302%. In the second one, it's 0.318%. Which means in some of these, they were deliberately making exactly the same percentages. That's difficult today for us to do that. So what I'm trying to show you, ladies and gentlemen, is these people who think that Atlantis is mythical. That might be what Wikipedia says. But what the most sophisticated scientific machine that read this was worth around about $100,000 tells us, and we analysed all of them at the same place, ladies and gentlemen. So therefore, the reading is from the same machine. How can they be so similar if it isn't a proper place? So the place exists, and what we've learnt is there's magic in those rings because we've dealt with them and we've had. Which one should we use? Oh, I know. We'll just tell you one story, okay? And this comes from Roz. I gave this morning, didn't we? We might as well use it again because it'll be a different group. It goes like this. Roz was holding Lemuria Ring 1, and she put it in her hand. She doesn't rub it like me. We've still got the grains of soil in her ring, so we can get OSL dating for that. And she was rubbing it on a Sunday night watching TV. And the ring told her to turn the TV set off. I know people are going to say, oh, bullshit, straight away when they heard that. Well, let me finish. So she turned the TV set off and it told her to go to the computer. So she did. She went to the computer and then she was given an address to type in. And the address, now she's been to Vietnam Memorability to get stuff, hasn't she? She goes to eBay for auction. She goes to archaeology for auction, but she never goes to a Thai arts and crafts shop. That's not where Ros goes when she's looking for archaeology. Nobody does. Well, Ros did. So she's wondering, what the hell am I doing here? Because the ring told me to type this in. She doesn't know that address. She's never been there before. Then it says, type in Giant's Ring. So she types it in, and lo and behold, she finds one for sale. And when she bought it, the ring told her, here it is again, the ring told her, don't even look at the ring, send it straight to me, which she did. And this, by the way, is the ring that she found. It's got one monkey, two monkeys, two elephants, and two pigs. All the way around, there's 6 animals. Ros's has got 4, and they are the same looking animals. Same features, same everything. But when I look at the chemistry of these 2 rings, they're the most dissimilar of all. This ring is nearly identical to Atlantis number 1. With the exception of the 10, you'd swear it's the same chemistry. The other ring is nothing like it. Nothing like it. Nothing's the same. But they look the same. They have the same animals, but they have a different function. And the function is in the magic, because it's the chemicals that they've used. But remember, the most magical chemical and metal on the planet is copper. You put a coronavirus microbe on copper and within 1 minute it's dead. It can kill 99% of all germs and microbes in the planet straight away. No other metal can do that. It's different. And that's why it's the carrier. But what we're finding in this chemistry is there is knowledge and wisdom here that we've only just understood. And there are chemicals and combinations there that we can only just do now. So when you hear the story about Atlantis and Lemuria, remember there are 5 rings that come from there. We've analysed them and it tells us that this is a true place. So I thought I'd just leave you alone now. I'll leave that science alone. But remember that every person listening to this has been to school. And that means they've been conditioned, even if they think they've put it away, to doubt anything unless it's in a book that they've read. Because remember, when you go to school, you don't learn to think. You learn to pass an exam, which means you memorize what another person tells you is a fact. Therefore, people are conditioned not to think correctly. So what I need to say, ladies and gentlemen, is what these ladies are talking about is true. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's still there. I'll pull back now. I've said my bit.
Wow.
Over to you, Rose. What's your next question, Rose?
Yeah, it's interesting you said copper is a very strong element that has the ability to heal and perform magic, because a lot of the a lot of cultures still use that element in like their dishware and like in their jugs and pitchers and stuff like that, because they know that it cleanses all the elements within water, or in anything that's put into that. So there are some cultures that maintain all the things that like Lemuria and all the other civilizations were. So yeah, I definitely could resonate with some of that. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of properties of copper that are really, really interesting. And one of them being very, very conductive as well, and also being one of the very few elements, even though when it's like fully solidified, you can bend it as many times as you like without actually breaking. So it doesn't actually form kind of like a molecular dent, and actually snaps after so many times you bend. So you can keep bending it as many times as you like before, indefinitely. So Yeah, copper's it's weird because like some of the folks upstairs tend to use a lot of they make a lot of their devices out of a variety of different elements. They make alloys, and one of the more important, especially in internal systems, is copper. It's not just copper, but it is a crucial part to actual.
Copper here either, is it? This one's a combination. I mean, this one I'm holding up now, which has the symbol. I don't know if you can see it. Probably can't.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Right. It's got the. Thank you, Evan. It has the motif for Atlas 6 times over, and there's a reason for that. And it's got 91% copper, which makes it, in one respect, probably the most powerful of the rings, which is the ring that, by the way, that offered to kill both Evan and Del. So it's got a mixed bag within it. But we know that one is. We believe that one. We can't say for sure. We believe that was worn by Atlas. And the reason why the copper content was so high was deliberate. It was deliberate. I mean, when you look at the copper content between 1 and 2, it's 99.53% to 99.36%. So they're nearly the same with copper and zinc together. But this one was made much higher in copper because I believe that Atlas wanted to access the magic more for the wrong reasons. For the very wrong reasons, I can assure you. He did it for the wrong reasons, but he wanted that control because in those early days of Atlantis, everyone knew magic existed. And unfortunately, Atlas grabbed a hold of that in a rather mistaken way, and he damaged number 1, and this one was made for him, but fortunately it's not completely screwed up because it was never cut, was it? In fact, I do remember when Roz said she was sending that ring to me, I said, if it's cut, don't send it. I don't want it. But it isn't cut. Yeah, so that one's okay. But there's something else that I wanted to talk about. When you were, before, Rose, you were talking about the matrilineal lines and the fact they're coming back. That prophecy, and actually the elders have been saying this now before the prophecy, weren't they? Every one of them said the same thing about this. When the change comes, it will be completely matrilineal. That's very important to understand. And what we've been told is that no male will be allowed to make a final decision. They can consult, they can advise the women, but they can never vote. And it's got to become matrilineal for a long period of time because it hasn't been for a long period of time. It's gone poorly. So you've got to remember too, that before about 6,000 years ago, my understanding is 99% of all original tribes were completely matrilineal. Yeah. They weren't patrilineal at all. In fact, I've been told, and we know the story about the ditch, don't we, Evan, even though he's gone. Well, ladies, have you heard of the didgeridoo? It's actually not, it's called a yidaki. You've heard of that, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you play it?
No idea how.
No, but would you put it on your mouth and play it? Would you try to?
I'll give it a go, yeah.
No, you wouldn't. No,
okay.
You would send every original person in Australia because it's a men's instrument.
Okay.
Woman plays it, they're supposed to either die, lose their babies, become infertile. It's horrible what happens to them, isn't it, Evan? And it's all a lie. It's not true. The didgeridoo was never a male instrument. Now, how did that come about? I've seen the woman, by the way, who's done this about 4 years ago, it might have been.
Yeah, that's right.
This young girl, an original girl, about 12 or 13, picked up the didge, and the men just said straight away, don't do it, put it in her mouth and played like a master, and she'd never played it before. Now, for the original people, this story, we saw it, it went around Australia because it doesn't make sense, because all women were told, if you touch a didge, not even play it, but touch it, you're going to get sick, probably die for touching it. So this became a big issue, because how could she play so well when she'd never played it before? And more to the point, she's playing it, she's not getting sick, she's not losing children, none of this stuff is happening. And it became, you guys wouldn't know about it because it became a big issue in the Bush Telegraph because no one could work it out. And she kept playing it, and the men were saying, don't do it. But when she played, they're looking at it thinking, there are levels of playing. And the highest level, Lionel plays at the highest level, doesn't he?
Does, yeah.
Lionel has played for us one of these things here. She's playing at that level, not the dancing around at the campfire, but the healing, the meditation level, the highest level is played for. And no one could work out why this was going on. And then finally the truth came out from Armenland, the great Didge player there. I think Lewis Walker went to him for 6 months to learn, and others have been to him for a while. He spilt the beans. He told everyone, because everyone's saying, what are we going to do? Should we punish this girl? And he said, no. And then he told the truth. And this is what happened to the whole world. He said 6,000 years ago, the Didge was a woman's instrument. Men never played it. Never played it at all. And 6,000 years ago, when women lost control all over the world, because this is what happened around 6,000 years ago, men took over everything. And women's role in all of these things was pulled back. The men stole the Didge off the women and then created, and some original people don't like me saying this, but this is where it come from, not from me. I'm only passing on the story, so don't shoot me. Then created a myth, a lie myth, not a true one, because most myths are true, that the women would get sick. Now, when you implant that in your head, if you play it and you believe it, you will get sick, right? That's just a psychosomatic thing. Self-fulfilling prophecy. And then the women all believed it, and they said, if I touch it, I'm going to get sick. And some didn't. They got sick because they talked themselves into it. And he said, the truth has to come out. And then he made a comment that I can't argue with him. It's a little bit crude. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. And he said this because the men started to say, you're wrong, you're wrong. Now, remember, they're talking to the Grand Master about this. And he looked at him and he said this. He said, tell me, what male would willingly suck on an instrument that looks like a penis? He said, only a woman would put up with that. A man would never do it. He said, forget it. It belongs to the women. No, and by the way, that shut him up. And that actually is interesting. After that point, she's still playing, and all the talk and complaints about her playing are gone. No one speaks about it anymore. But she is now considered one of the great masters. But in mainstream, people still think that the Didge is a male instrument. And that shows you the reason why we know this change is coming about, because one of those lies has been shown up now. The lie has come unstuck, and this woman continues to play the Didge. And I believe that she's considered possibly the third best player in the world, with basically no training. And she's taught herself. Because it's obviously in a past life, way back 6,000 years ago, she must have been a great master, and that skill has never left her. And now the time is changing. That's what happens. And I'll just close because I don't want to speak too much, because I don't want the ladies to be cut out of this, because I'd like them to talk a fair bit. But the last thing I'd like to say about that, and I've now forgotten it, what was it? It followed after that.
Jeez, I'm not that psychic.
That's your job, for Christ's sake. I've forgotten again. I'm old. Come on, Evan. Come on. What was I going to say after that?
I have no idea where you're going next.
I've lost it too, because
something about matrilineal coming back, prophecy.
Valerie, you'll understand what's going on here. I've forgotten something I was going to say. I'm sure that never happens to you, but it does happen to me more and more. That's the main reason why I drag Evan around. But
living bookmark. Yeah,
I've got to say he's disappointed me, because I had another very important point I was going to close on, and you should have remembered what it was before I said it. No, I'm going to leave it for now. It'll come back later. I'm going to sit in the corner. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, the change is coming. The women are going to actually take over the whole thing. And when that prophecy takes place on the 21st of December at Uluru, where the men dance at Uluru and do a ceremony, don't worry, there's somewhere else, and I can't say where, the women will be doing the same thing at the same time, because without the women doing this, there won't be a change. And once the change takes place, the women will be doing everything, and the men will do everything but telling other people what to do, because we had 6,000 years of it. And I'm afraid if you go through the history books, and I used to teach history in high school, I've checked, we screwed up. We screwed up all the way along. Oh, that's what it was.
Before you forget it.
Got it.
Oh, I can't believe that. Pathetic. You
No
should have
chance in
remembered that.
hell, actually.
Right, last thing I wanted to say was this. When men fought, because sometimes, unfortunately, men just can't help themselves. They've got to fight each
I
other.
know where you're going to go.
Oh, yeah, it's a
There's
women's
no way I
thing.
would have been able to think that you were going to go with this
Oh,
next.
man, you should have known. Okay, this is something you need to understand. Even though I've got to make the point, after that's changed, I've got to still just tell you the majority of tribes, even when Cook came in, was still matrilineal. Okay, that was still matrilineal. But here's the rule. This is the most important part, and it shows you what's going to happen in the future. The rule is this: if men had to fight in a tribe and they couldn't resolve their differences, remember a clan's only 50 people, so it's got to be sorted out quickly. They could only fight if they could find a woman. And what happens is that they start the fight, and when the woman says stop, it must finish. If one man doesn't listen to what the woman says and continues fighting, all the rest of the men bash him to within an inch of his life because he didn't listen to the woman who had to stop the fight. Men understand. The original men understood perfectly that there's something within us that we've never fully controlled, our aggression, and therefore when we went to that stage, we bowed to the women. We bowed to the women and said, when it comes to this sort of stuff, we are not the masters. Please tell me when to stop. And if I don't, I must be bashed because I didn't listen to the women. That gives you an idea that even though in Australia, matrilineal concepts came into play, they were still ameliorated by the women. And the reason's very simple. It's because the men fear the women, don't they? Mm-hmm. You've got to understand that. Black fellas are more scared. A black fella, being a male, is pretty scared of black fella magic, but incredibly scared of white women's magic. Much more scared of that because women have more powerful magic than men. Now in the future, and we know this, and even today, everyone knows that the women have more power when it comes to this. And I know the dreaming story about how that began when two sisters had a dilly bag with all the magic inside it, and one of the brothers stole it.
Yes.
And they were asked, will we kill the brother for stealing that? And they should have been killed. And she made a very important point. She said, the men have no magic. We create. They can never do that. So their magic is always weaker. Let them take the dilly bag and let them have the second-rate magic. But remember, we are the creators. They can never do that. So our magic will always be stronger. Men have forgotten that. You've got to remember a very important part that kept the men at bay was this. Men are told when a woman falls pregnant, it's not you. You don't do it. It's between the woman and the spirit. They come to an agreement when she falls pregnant and they make the baby. What we supply is an endless supply of sperm that they will decide to use on a particular day. Now, I've seen this ceremony. This is getting back to matrilineal again and the way it'll be in the future. And I was lucky enough to see a film ceremony of a male meeting his child for the first time. And what happens is when the birth takes place, the women take her aside, and for the first week, male or female, things are whispered into that child's ear. And I think the story, what's whispered in, I'm not going to get it right word for word. It goes something like this. It is from a woman you were born. It is a woman who will marry you, and it is a woman who will provide most of the food. That's whispered into the child's ear, male or female, for a week. Then after a week, they have a ceremony where the grandmother and the mother bring the child in to the father. Now, the father lays on the ground with his arms outstretched like this, and they place the child on top of his chest. And he has a couple of minutes to meet his child for the first time. And after those 2 or 3 minutes, the grandmother picks the child up, and they take him away or her away, and they keep him for longer. And they keep teaching the child at the very beginning women's magic, so that every person, be it male or female, understands the women come first. Then after a period of time, maybe a couple of weeks, then the child comes back to the tribe and the male can start to meet their child for the first time. And notice what I said, meet for the first time. The whole concept, the conception is not his. It's between the spirit and the women. Now, I think that's a fantastic belief, and I believe it's true, by the way, because what it means is when the man says, it's my child, well, not really. It's your wife's child. You're just helping out a bit. And they understand that. They'll still say it's my family because it's their blood in there, but they understand the point of conception. Remember what I said before when I said the woman said, we create, they do not? It's that much. It goes to that extent where the men accept this. And what that also does, it teaches the men what their role was to protect. To protect. They don't create, they protect. And remember this, when the whites came here, and the whites would come to an Aboriginal tribe and try and convince the men, they wouldn't speak to the women. They'd say to the men, we're going to do this, we'll give you that. And of course, we're lying through our teeth. The whites were lying all the way through there. And the blackfellas might say, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And they'd say, great. They say, oh, just 1 second. They say, what is it? We've got to go and ask the women now. And they go and ask the women. And then they come back and say, all bets are off. They say, why? Well, the women didn't agree to it. We can't do it now. The men, the white, European, British men could never understand that. It didn't make sense to them because their women did what they were told, as they should. But in this society, which is, by the way, remember, Australia is the remnant of Lemuria, they had kept a lot of the traditions from Lemuria, and they understood that you don't do anything unless the women agree to it. So to an extent, until about 6,000 years ago, Australia was living the perfect example of what was taking place in Lemuria. Then something happened everywhere where males took over, and the rest of the world, we had armies, but in Australia, it was ameliorated to an extent, but not completely, not completely. Now, what our original men today have got to understand is they're probably picking up a lot of bad European habits about how to treat women, and they don't treat them as well as they should. Very soon from now, that gets fixed. And when that happens, what's really going to take place is we're going to pick up that Lemurian concept that was in one part of Australia and parts of the Pacific Ocean, and it becomes a global way of living. And if proper women, and I'm going to make this point, proper women does not include Margaret Thatcher, Golda Meir. I mean proper women, not women trying to be men. When they lead this planet, it will be paradise. So that's what this change is all about. And that's what Lemuria is about. And that's why I'm trying to say to people, like they said before, glance at Atlantis, but stare at Lemuria. That's what we should be doing. And I'll let the ladies talk now because I've had enough.
Yep.
That's
Stephen, I love it. I love it. I really do. It's great. I don't think women want to take over, you know, to control everything. They don't want that. They just want equal respect and equal.
I agree, Valerie, but we've got to remember the men need to take a breath. We do need to take a breath, and we do need to step back. And you've got to remember that great Greek myth when the men were going to go to war and the women said, well, you're not coming back into my bedroom, and the men stopped. It's got to that stage. I'm not suggesting that's how we do it, but we do need a period now because we've had men that have been completely in control and women like men that have been in control for far too long. There has to be a balance. And remember, men can talk to the women and say, I think we should do this. I think we should do this. And women could say, yeah, I think it's a great idea. I'll take it on and we'll do it. But we've had 6,000 years where we've got it wrong. And I think the men have to admit the fact that we screwed the planet up. We've made an incredible mess. Women create babies. They are nurturers. They are creators. We've had enough destroyers. We've got to turn it around. So I don't know that, I'm sure that women don't want to be sitting in parliaments and stuff, and it won't be like that. I've been told that all decisions will be made around a fire pit in a circle. No one will sit in rows anymore when this happens. And the men can sit on the outside of the fire pit and they could be there chucking in their ideas, what they think. But it's time for the women to heal the planet. And remember, when this planet gets healed, I've been told this many times with this prophecy, when this planet heals and the elevation, the Schumann resonance sits up to 150 and 200, that doesn't resonate through the planet. It goes through the cosmos. This, what happens here on that day, will have a ripple effect that runs everywhere in every possible direction. So that is why our alien guides, mentors and colleagues have been here for so long And they've been waiting for this event for such a long period of time. And that's why the Pleiadians left behind those crystals at Uluru. So it all runs around in a perfect circle, but the circle must be female for the next 1,000, 2,000 years. I don't know how long it goes for, but there will be a long period where we just take a deep breath and realize what this planet actually offers us, because we don't understand that at the moment. Right, I've said enough.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just with my contacts. Now it's interesting when talking about, you know, masculine versus feminine. That always seems to be the discussion here. That's always a point of discussion on this world. It's always femme versus male, and it's just like, you know, that's not what happens. Well, not that I've observed out with my guys upstairs. Like, they don't really. It's feminine and masculine. It's not one of the, you know, it's not one today and then one and then the other tomorrow. It's side by side, and some of them in truth, sorry, in truth, they care about the person being able to do the job. Basically, that's what it comes down to. If you're an effective leader, then it doesn't matter how you're born as. You know, it doesn't matter if you've got the tenacity, if you've got the focus, if you've got the wisdom, if you've got the power to do it, then that's great. But yeah, like, I don't know why there's this obsession here. That's the one thing I don't understand, why there's such an obsession.
That's why we've got to balance it out, because it's got to have control. It has to be rebalanced for a while. It's like a reset. It won't be forever. I'm not saying forever. It's always going to be women running the show, because that would be ridiculous. That's not fair. But there's so much to clean up.
Yeah.
So many people have got wrong thoughts in their head. I mean, and I mean, a lot of women go home and their husbands don't treat them well. That's wrong. I don't understand that. That's just utterly wrong. Any male that hits a female is not worthy to be on this planet. It's very simply not worthy. They shouldn't even be here, but they are. So there's got to be a reset. I mean, I treat everyone equally. I don't care male or female. We're just souls, and I could be for female one life and male the next. It doesn't really matter. But we've got that wrong here. And it's one of the biggest problems on this planet, because I honestly believe that if you would, to begin with, even Atlantis, as you were saying, even when they were falling apart and doing things wrong, they still didn't get that part wrong. They didn't get the male-female part wrong. Lemuria never got it wrong. The original people that were here never got it wrong. We never had that wrong. It's just something that's been brought into this. Maybe it's reptilian, maybe it's draconian. I don't really know. I'm not sure. I don't know why it happened to this planet 6,000 years ago, but it did. It did. And it needs to be rebalanced. I agree. But what I think a lot of men need to understand is they need to embrace their feminine side, and they're scared to. And I think they need some time out to just take a breath and work out the fact that it's time for some other voices to take over and nurture this planet again. And once that's balanced out, then the men will come back and start to make decisions, but not for a while. I don't know how long that's going to be. It could be just for 2 generations. It could be for 20. Going on one look around here, it might be a bit longer than that, because it's, God, there's some really bad situations. I mean, there's still parts of the world today where women are treated worse than animals.
Oh, yes.
There's seriously places where that's still happening to this very day, and will be happening on the 20th of December. But I can tell you, after the 21st of December, I would say something like that would be considered a mortal sin that would mean that you would never ascend. If you treated a woman incorrectly after that day, that would be like you're done for straight away. That would be worse than murder. So these things have to be understood. The truth is that this is what the elders have told me, and what I believe is true, is this could be the most magical planet in the cosmos, and we're just not embracing it anymore. We've lost it. And remember, Evan and I have been with someone like Kano, and we know magic exists because we've seen it. We've seen magic. What humans would call miracles, they call party tricks. They call them party tricks. I mean, I've seen so many things. Telepathy, Kano doesn't do it with people. He does it with a red kangaroo, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. He can talk to a red kangaroo, and the red kangaroo will tell him what we did 3,000 Ks away 4 hours before, and he'll ring you up and tell you everything you did. Now, how did that happen? It's a miracle. No, it's not. It's magic. Where did it come from? It didn't come from Kano. It came from the earth. That earth radiates magic every second of the day, and we block it out. In the past, we used it more. As you said, Leah, telepathy was not a big deal in the past because that was the first language. Remember that. If telepathy is there, I can trust humans. If there's no telepathy and I've got to listen to their words, I can't trust any of them. I can trust my ring from Lemuria because it came from a time when telepathy was normal, and the icons on that ring are all animals. I can always trust an animal because animals are true to their nature. They're not deceitful. They do what they're supposed to do, and they live according to nature's law. So I can trust that ring because it's all to do with animals. The Atlantean Rings, I can't trust them. Why? Because the icons on it, Atlas on this one, Atlas and Atlantis on the other one, which means both Atlantis is a construct by humans and Atlas is a human. So both those rings can't be trusted. The other rings, all animals, I trust them implicitly and they never lie to me. What we've got to get back to is talking telepathically, then there'll be trust in the world. And once there's trust in the world, there's no planet like this one. People don't understand. This is one of the most beautiful planets anywhere.
You haven't been to an Alzona yet. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. You'll have to be to Alzona. Like I'm a oh my god, like, you know, I'm a tour guide. Let me oh shit. Okay, anyway.
We're going to have an argument about that because I say the best music in the world comes from the earth, and you're on about another planet where the music's better there again.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. You will lose each time.
Step second, first for the earth and second for your mob. Well, just agree to disagree on that one.
Well, okay, fair enough. You haven't heard it yet, so I understand there's a bit of ignorance, but that's okay. That's okay. Just give it time. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, no, it's shit. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say something. I got lost track. Oh, the rings. Yeah. And to mention the fact that you've got talking about how the rings have, like, one ring has animals on it and the other ring has, like, basically a depiction of a deity, of a human or humanoid-like deity. It's weird because if you actually look at the animal ring, the hole is really, really big, so like too large for an actual human finger to fit in.
You mean like that?
Yeah.
Like when I put two fingers in, I still got plenty of room. Is that?
Yeah. So yeah, it was intended for someone very big and likely not Homo sapien. So there you go.
Well, there's a story in Angkor Wat. Roz chased it up. Oh, I said I wasn't going to talk anymore, but Roz chased this up. It started with a baker that came from Cambodia, and she started talking about the ring and stuff like that. And she said, "Oh yeah, Angkor Wat." She said to her, "Do you know why all the doors there are so big?" And Roz said, "No." She said, "Because there were giants there in those days." And she said, "The giants were much bigger than us. They were black, and they looked like you were Aboriginal people." Now, what Roz then did is she found two tour guides, didn't she? Videos of two tour guides who were taking people out. And they all said exactly the same thing, that these rings, or Angkor Wat, was not made for the Homo sapiens that we know of today, because you make a door for the size of the person that goes there. Now, if you go into England and you find the old houses there, you're going to bang your head on most of the doors because, oh, little shrimps, they weren't tall. These things are massive, as you know. If you've been to Angkor Wat, they're right up the top. Well, this ring here, all of these rings we found from Angkor Wat have that sort of diameter where you can put two fingers in there. I could actually fit my two fingers or my pinky in if I was a cat. I could put 3 fingers inside that ring. And by the way, the other point you've got to remember is when you put it on there, it falls like that. It weighs over 100 grams and it falls every time. And if you leave it on your finger for about 5 minutes, it hurts. It's too heavy. It's not for us. It's for giants. And of course, that's, in fact, it was funny because she typed in giant's ring and this came up. It's not for us. You couldn't wear it. It is for a giant. Whether that giant is an original person or whether it's a black alien, I don't know. But what they were saying was like at least twice our size. And they were sitting in the throne at Angkor Wat when it was Lemuria. So yeah, you're right about that, Leah. And because the other rings, the Atlantean rings, they fit on your finger. I've worn both of them. And you've actually seen one, the first one, didn't you? The one that's got all the evil in that you like so much.
Yeah, we became really good friends that day.
Yes, you did. You really, your eyes lit up when you put it on, and it's half evil, half good. Okay, and I've got to make that point that Leah and Evan both know what happened to it. Someone actually got a hold of it and gave ceremony to the evil part of it. And from that point on, it's been a battle. I find that ring, Evan hasn't seen it in months, have you? I've hidden it. And it sounds a bit like Tolkien. If I had a volcano, I'd throw it in there. Seriously. I think it's a ring that I don't think anyone should wear because you could do untold bad with it. It goes both ways, don't get me wrong, but if you're a person with wrong intention, then it will go that way. But the problem is that we had a person who used it for a while and they used it to kill people. We know that, and you know that too, Leah. And that brought that side out of it, so it's become dominant. And again, I know this sounds like pretty hard for people who believe in science to understand, but I'm going to tell you now, you haven't been where Evan and I have been, and we know there's magic in these rings. And it's interesting, the magic in the Lemurian rings is utterly brilliant, positive, not harmful. I know that. And the other ones, I'm still wearing one because I can control one, but I'm at the stage now where I don't think, and I'm the only person who's worn that other one part, one other person. That didn't work out well for them, did it? No. Not at all. I rarely put it back on. It doesn't matter, but because I've had it on so often, so many times, even if I threw it in the volcano, it's still got my number. And I can tell you, it still visits me constantly. And all the thoughts it gives you, you wouldn't want. You wouldn't want them. I've had dreams that are just dreadful dreams. And I know it's been put in there by that ring. It's really not a good piece of work. And the same way when it met, the same sort of attitude was when it met my wife and Evan. It wanted to kill them both. And it tried to kill you. It's just something that's gone wrong with Atlantis. I'm agreeing what you said. It started off so brilliantly and ended so badly, but the rings went all the way through that, and they've taken all that energy from the start to finish. And considering it ended up destroying itself, that's where the rings came out of this. So they're a great start, and there have been very few people. It's funny, possibly the only person that hasn't had a negative reaction was you when you put it on, Leah. Your eyes lit up and you had a huge smile on your face. It was like coming back home again. But since then, it's got worse. So yeah, the places exist, ladies and gentlemen. They're there. Well, not anymore, one of them.
Dave, can I just bring back the subject about the giants and the black? When we were at Uluru, back in 1994, a ranger took us up a hill, was playing a didgeridoo, and he was the psychic man. We didn't know at the time. And he allowed the energy to come and take him over, and he was moving around, well, I'd say blessing people with the rainbow serpent energy. It was quite extraordinary, really. From my own experience, though, I saw this very large black figure coming straight from Uluru, about 4 steps, that's what it was. And she started speaking to me, and it was a very, very huge black giantess. And when I told the ranger, he said to me, they know them here, they know her here. Her name is Gulagaga. So have you heard about her? Yes. Yeah, well, she's been back a few times. Yes.
When we were in Island with Carter, which is Kano spoke about the giants that are this high too. And he spoke about them, he said they're on the island. I said, oh, yeah, okay. And I could see some people, because I'm a scientist first up, and I'm thinking, even when Kano says something to me, sometimes I think, I don't know about that. See, I spent my whole life in school. I've been really trained. And anyway, two white fellas came up to me and said, we could tell you didn't believe Kano. I said, oh, no. I said, yeah, we could see that. And they both told me they've seen him. They've seen him. I said, no, that lives here. It lives here. And it was a giant. Yeah, same thing. I think you'll find, Valerie, in all the sacred places, the giant spirits, because they're a giant original people, whether they're crossed between another, I don't know, Pleiadians, that I don't know that part. But you're right. Kano said they're there, and if they're there, they're there. So what they told you, I don't know what name they called the one at Carter. I don't know what name it was, because there's a very sacred portal. I think it guards it. It's a really important portal. But I think you'll find Uluru, probably Katajuka, and many other sites. There will be giant spirits there also. And they were in Angkor Wat, and they were the leaders. They were the people sitting in the throne. So what we can gather from that is not only were they giants from a stature point of view, they must have been incredibly intelligent to be taking the throne, to be sitting in that position. And it's interesting you said that they gave it a name. I think Kano and those guys had a name for it too, but they never told us, did they? But they made it clear to me, those men, those two white men, not original men, they said, we've seen it. Don't you think for a second that's Kano making that up? He doesn't make up, because Kano doesn't make up anything about culture. He never lies about culture.
No,
he never did that. But yes, you're not wrong, Valerie. What you saw is legit. It wasn't you, mate, because you don't make that stuff up anyway. We know that.
No, well, she actually initiated me, not in my earth body. I think that was just still sitting on the sandhill. But I was taken. She told me to take my shoes and socks off, come with her, and there were 7 other women with her, and they were all laughing. They were lovely. And they took me down to the water, you know, at Matrilineal Springs.
No,
and walked me into there under Uluru. And I was initiated. And so I've been in contact with her. She's lovely. She keeps coming. She says she was holding the energy of the 8th white sister, meaning the 8th sister from the star person, from the Pleiades, because they did have blue-white skin. That's what she meant. But they were the ones with the story of helping to create genetically the first people, indigenous people.
And of course, as we all know, water is women's business. Only women can talk about water. That belongs to them. If a man talks about water, he can get I remember once Harry Boyd spoke about water once, and boy, did he get into trouble with the women. We can't even talk about water. That belongs to women. It's very important too. Water is the staff of life. It belongs to women. Can you see what's coming through all of this? The Lemurian way of doing this was so elegant. Everything was balanced out. Men could never speak about water. And of course we had, the men, I think we had fire. But what's more important, without water, there is no life. Life comes out of water. So you're right, to be taken to that spring, that's a big honor, a very big honor, Valerie.
Yes, I've always felt very blessed by that. And later on, I took a photo at another time. I was at Uluru, and I called on Gulagaya to come. And what happened was, when I looked at the photo in the camera, it had 7 + 1 orbs. 7 were all rainbow orbs, and I knew it was her, this magenta, almost a bit darker than your shirt, that color, beautiful magenta color. And it's shown to me a number of times like that, and I always know it's connecting. Also, they said, to another galaxy altogether, where people there have been watching us and caring for us and trying to help us. It's just a matter of us asking, because we have free will. And if we ask, then they can come. They're not breaking any universal law.
That reminds me too, Valerie, it's a sacred place for women, which I believe is a portal to the Pleiades, and that's a carry-on. You know the table, don't you?
Yes, that's right.
That's it. Yeah, and you're not disagreeing with me, are you? No, it's not. It's an actual.
Well, actually, if I can say, the reason we went to Uluru was because we visited Carryong first with Jerry, the Aboriginal healer, the beautiful man. We love him. And he took us there, and we all experienced and remember a memory of being star people. And the story went on from there. Yes, I haven't got a lot of clear lineage, but I do remember being star people. But some of them, from the Pleiades, we were quite tall, was 7 to 8 feet, 9 feet, the males were. So that wasn't the same as the giantess. She was really big.
By the way, you do know that there are original people who know where the giantesses are buried in Australia. And I actually know, and Evan knows too, we know where one giantess is buried. And when the time is right, we'll do more with that.
That'd be wonderful, yes.
Oh, we know where it is. I've been told, and this comes from Auntie Millie Boyd, who was one of the last women in Australia that had all the old way knowledge. She was like Kano. And I got told by an apprentice of hers that spent 10 years with her. And of course, I can't say a loud word. She said, I'm allowed to give you, 5th level women's stuff, which that goes up to 7. I was lucky to get 5, and I was told where the giantess is. Now, you will find there are stories written down about it, aren't there, Evan, about the giantess being buried, but nobody knows where. We know. We know
right.
where they're buried.
The giantess visited me a few times, mainly at Uluru, but she did come to visit when we lived at Lea in the Southern Highlands. That was a surprise. We had a meeting, and there was a whole group of people, and she came in and she's making jokes. I've got the recording actually, and she was making jokes about taking over. I cannot take this over. Valerie, or she called me Val, I think, and take over the body. I am too big. And she was making fun and laughing, and she had her hands out. Everybody. And there were some people there that had lived and worked at Uluru in the early days before Yulara, and they said that they had seen paintings of Gulagaya, and she did just that, exactly the same. And she'd do it when the little children from the tribes would start to go somewhere where it was dangerous, and she'd frighten them, to make them run home back to the tribe. Yeah. She's beautiful. She's lovely.
It's interesting, Valerie, what you're saying there, that you've got to remember, before we came here, this whole country was magic. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but there wasn't anyone that questioned the idea that magic existed.
Yes.
That was just considered like it was like air. It was everywhere, and it was fully understood. And it's amazing how we've gone from that. And of course, white fellas say, "Oh, it's all a load of rubbish." And I say to them, "Have you ever heard of 2 male magicians called Nostradamus and Merlin?" "Oh, yeah, I've heard of them." I said to them, "Do you think that if they couldn't perform magic, they would have been allowed to stay in the courts? Because in those days, if someone didn't do the right thing, they just cut their head off. Why was it they were so important? Why did you hear about them for so long? Because even in that time, that tradition of magic was still accepted. I do remember Nostradamus predicted the death of the king and told him he would die in a jousting with a lance going through there into his eye, and he'd lay in agony for 10 days. And lo and behold, it happened exactly like that. Now, predicting the death of a king, wouldn't that normally mean you're going to be killed for even saying it? But no, they listened to it. The king ignored him, but I can tell you after that, the whole court listened to Nostradamus. Now, how did he get that right? Those sort of predictions. I know another prediction, don't I, Evan? Oh, yeah. You want to hear of predictions and this sort of stuff? I'll give you another example of Nostradamus, and the name is Auntie Minnie Mace. She's a blackfellow woman. She lives at Bribie Island. And she's going to be talking in one of our... Oh, not this one, but the next one, isn't she? Yeah. That's a story I've told quite a few times, but I don't think I've told it to this group. Rose, I don't think I've told it to you. This was when Nina came up. She came up with Lavinia to do one of the talks here when we could talk to humans face to face before they made that illegal. And she told us, she said, "Do you remember what Auntie Minnie Mace told us 5 years ago?" And Evan and I looked at her and said, well, where's this going? She said, do you remember the story about the toilet papers? And we're still looking at it like this, and I'm thinking, what are you talking about here? Because I'm going to be honest, I didn't. And Evan, did you remember it?
No, I didn't remember.
No, didn't remember any of it because it was stupid, what she said. Well, we thought it was, but it wasn't. What she said was 5 years ago. Someone said to her, what's the first sign of the change? What will be the first sign of the change that everyone can see when the change begins? Because all original people know it's coming. She said, that's easy. This is according to Lydia, not us, because we were sitting there, and I know what I thought. I probably thought, oh, she's having a bad day. That's ridiculous. And when you hear something ridiculous, you don't keep it in your head. You throw it out. Well, this is what she told Lavinia and us, but we were sort of there in mind, but not in spirit. Yeah. She said, the first change will be this. She said, people will fight over toilet paper. There'll be security guards looking after toilet paper. People will be lining up in supermarkets trying to get toilet paper and they won't get any. And she said, I then went and bought toilet paper. Levin, this is true, by the way, because she told us about this. She bought 3 years worth of toilet paper. She bought a whole room. You couldn't get in there. And for 3 years, she kept the toilet paper in that room and waited and waited and waited for this change that was supposed to happen where she couldn't get toilet paper. And after this period of time, she thought, oh, she'd lost it. This is ridiculous. So she started using it up. And she finished using it about a week before the COVID outbreak started. And then soon after, there was a massive run on toilet papers in Australia all over, and it made no sense. But I say to people, how many people on this planet 5 years ago predicted that? And the answer would be one person, only Minnie Mace. But the thing you've got to remember, she said that's the sign of the change. So if you accept the fact she was right, which she was, then she must be right about the fact that was the first sign. But who would have picked that as the first sign that people will talk about in the future? It's when the COVID virus started, the whole of this change really kicked in, because we've been predicting for years there'd be a pandemic. We've been saying this for quite some time. I'm not happy about the fact we're right, but the elders told us to say that, and it was happening. But the sign for that, the sign for the change, was exactly what she said. And we told quite a few people that, and I say the same thing. Only Minnie Mace didn't go to university. She hasn't got a PhD in anything, has she? Mind you, in Egypt, she knows more about it than anyone on this planet. But she knew that, and no one else did. And you've got to think to yourself, well, if she knew about the toilet paper and it's happened, what about the second part, which is it's a sign of the change? A equals B in this case. So, yeah, they've known about this for a long time. And I can tell you the elders have been doing ceremonies. I've been told this. I haven't seen them. We've been told for 9 years leading up to this one. You just can't do this one first. You've got to have preparatory ceremonies to build into that. So they've been working on this for a long, long time. Now, not all the original people know about it. But here's the point. Not all of the original people will get past this. Quite a few of them aren't going to make it. Just because you're black, it doesn't mean you're going to get through the other side. It's not like this. It's got nothing to do with colour. It doesn't matter anymore. It's all to do with your soul and whether it's pure. It's as simple as that. And there are sort of, I suppose, how can I put this? There are a certain number of things you've got to do to get on the other side. And I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be easy for anyone. When this change comes, there's no guarantee anyone's going to make it, not even me. I'm not even sure I can make it because I know what the rules are, what they say your soul's got to be like, and it's got to be pure. And I don't think, I know mine isn't, and I don't think many are, but, oh, gee, I tell you what, there's some pretty tough calls here, what you've got to get right to do this. I remember what I was told, the things you've got to do, the conditions you've got to meet to be part of this. And I remember what I heard the last one. I said to the guy at the time, looks like I'm with the other mob. Well, I don't think I can make that. So, and we'll talk about that, of course, not now, Valerie, but in our presentation, because we don't want to give it all away now, do we? Otherwise, people think, well, I've heard it all, I won't go to my presentation. So that would be a bad idea. So if you are prepared to spend the princely amount of 26 measly dollars, you get about 7 hours to watch over, what, a week, isn't it? Mm-hmm. To watch all that. And within that, I'll go through and tell you all of the conditions I've been told so far. The elders tell me you've got to get to before you make it to the other side. And don't worry, we've been discussing it amongst ourselves about whether we'll make it or not, haven't we, Leah?
Yeah.
Yes, we have.
I don't know, but hang on a minute. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty pure. So, like, just back up.
Oh, are you? Okay, I don't know. That's what we were saying before, Leah.
I've been staring at myself in the mirror for the last hour. I'm going to do pretty well. Like, I don't know.
I thought our conversation was slightly different to that. I mustn't have listened properly, Evan. I thought we were discussing sharing our faults that we've got to improve on. I must have been at a different conversation, Evan.
Listen, I've been rubbing hand sanitizer on me, so I'm sanitized. I'm good. I'm getting in. I'll drink it.
Clean yourself by cleaning your hands. It doesn't work that way. Nice try, mate.
Yeah.
I'll run it past the elders whether cleaning your soul with sanitizer is good enough to get the other side. But I got a feeling, mate, they might be asking for just a touch more than that. But anyway, we could try it. Not a bad call, that one. I like that. Sanitizing hands. Can I get the other side with that?
No, not just hands. I'll shower in it if I have to.
Oh, well, that makes all the difference. Well, then that's all you need. I'm not sure that I'm going to mention that as one of the conditions, Lee. I'll let you try that one, okay? I think my ones were a little bit harder than that, weren't they, Evan? Yes, mine were a bit tougher. Yeah, so anyway, look, we'll talk about that on the day of our presentation, and I'm sort of inviting people here, listeners, to come along, because these two wonderful ladies will be part of that. And we've got a few others too. We've got an original person that's going to, and we're going to talk a lot about one of the greatest human beings who walked on this planet in the last 100 years, which is Kano. And we're going to tell you a lot of stories about that. We're going to have, well, you're going to see a video of Kano doing a ceremony, conducting a ceremony to Uluru, asked by the elders there to conduct the ceremony. It gives you an idea who this man is. Going to see another elder. We've got a little video of 7 minutes of her talking about him and how he's not like anyone else she's ever met. Same, we both agree with that, of course. And then Darren, who's a Ramangeri and Bundjalung man, he's going to spend a lot of time talking about him. So we are. So we are too. And what I'm going to tell people is this is the sort of person that needs to lead us in the future. And I'm afraid there's not one politician that could even have the right to stand in Kano's shadow. They, in fact, not even in his presence. They wouldn't deserve to be near a person like that. And our point is we want to show you an example of what we can be like in the future, all of us. And remember, we'll talk about some of the, what's the word, miracles? No, party tricks, sorry, party tricks, that sort of, yeah. We'll talk about some of the party tricks he's done, and I'm telling you now, we're not lying about them. He told me about one, which was quite funny. I remember, and I'll talk about it now. He's going to talk about more detail. I remember once when we went down to Carter, Kangaroo Island, and Darren turned around and he saw me standing in my clothes with my jeans with water up to here, about 30 metres out into the sea. Kano told me to go and do it, and I had to do it. And he come back later and said, "What did you do that for?" He told me to, mate. Oh, right, okay. And he's never found out why, but I know why he told me to do that. So when he tells you to go and stand in freezing cold water at Kangaroo Island, because I've got to tell you, that current comes from the Antarctic, by the way. It's freezing cold, but he said, because he asked me a question, and it's about the third time in my life I've ever got a question right. And he looked at me and said, "You've got one right, then you're going to get a reward." I said, "Oh, thanks, Kano. What is it?" He said, "Go and walk out to there where those rocks are." I said, "Oh, can I take my shoes off?" "No." He said, "Go now." And so off I went. Sand shoes, jeans, the whole business, standing in the freezing cold. When I got there, I said, "Can I come back?" He said, "Not yet." Spent about 15 minutes standing there. You normally wouldn't do that for anyone else unless you felt like, I'm going to do whatever you say. He's about the only person I've ever met where if you ask me to do something, I do it without questioning. And when you meet a person like that, we're going to share that a bit too. So it'll be an interesting put together of different stuff, but it's based around the same thing. It's a change that's coming. And I'm pleased to say, and Leah knows this to be true, that for some time, I wasn't quite sure what the opinion of the people that Lea spoke to was about in regards to this. But we finally found out they're on side with it. They know it's coming too. Lea did get a sort of confirmation of that. It was a bit sign language-ish, but still okay. So that was quite important for me too, because I'm going to make the point again. I actually know for a fact that Lea is talking to that being. I know that's true, and I'd bet my house on it. And I know I wouldn't lose it. I'd be prepared to bet against anyone. And I'm also going to make another point. The other lady standing alongside, that's a couple of years older than Lea. Just a couple, 5 or 6 years older, Valerie, no more than that. She has legitimate, as Lea is, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, these are the best two channelers we have in Australia. And that's why we've got them on our show, because we only get the very best. When we go overseas, and we're going to do some overseas, we get Michael Tellinger, Klaus Duna, we get the best everywhere. And when we go to Australia, there's a lot of people doing this, but if they aren't the very best that can do that particular subject, we don't touch them. Because if we're going to do this, if we're going to talk about the future, I can only bring in the A team. I can't bring in the B or C team. And if we've got someone who's given a presentation where it's not good enough, or we don't think it is good enough, we don't use them again, do we, Evan? We only do the very best here. And these two ladies we've got here, this is as good as it gets in this country. It doesn't get better.
And so, pretty, you forgot that bit.
Yes, Valerie, you look stunning.
All right. Well,
this young lady over there, Valerie, is even a little bit older than I am. And look how brilliant she looks today. So you're right about that, Lea. I should have mentioned that earlier to Valerie.
You're killing.
Lady on the other side, too. She scrubs up pretty well, too. Very dark with what she wears, but she still scrubs up okay. So I've got one that looks very white and one that looks very dark, but they are, they're pretty good in both respects. They scrub up well, and they're the best you're going to get.
I'm going to...
Compliments for you two. No more.
You know what? I quit.
I don't do that too often. How many compliments do I give you, Evan? About 3?
I think I've had about 3.
Yeah, right. So you guys have got your... That's it. That's all you get.
Okay, fine.
All right. How are we going, Rose? Are we we got a well? What time do we start here?
Oh yes, I think a couple 2 hours ago.
2 hours again.
Nice.
Sorry, probably a bit over time. I had a few thoughts come through, but I should have written some more down.
All right, get Evan to tell you what they were, like I do.
I am the living bookmark.
I need someone here to, yeah, it's okay though. I think you covered a lot of stuff, and it was very good information. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Rose. Again, I want to say thanks for covering this. You've covered this before, and we're going to make sure whenever we do this, you're going to be one of the first people we go to, because you've been helping us in other ways we won't talk about here. And we are great believers when people help us out, we must always help them back in return. And we appreciate how you're helping us in other ways that we don't need to discuss here. So yeah, now our eternal thanks for bringing us on. And as I said before, the people who are watching this, come and watch something about our future and our past. But remember, original timeline is not linear, it's circular. And the loop and the hoop is complete. And now is the time everything changes. That's why the virus is here. Well, that's why everything's taking place today, because this is when the system that we've had for so long is falling apart all around us. And that gives people an opportunity to sit down and think to themselves, what's going on here? And that's what this is all about. This is why people get a chance to change, because if they're locked into a system where they think it's working fine, they won't look. They've got no excuse now, because they know what they've got's falling apart. I mean, we've got leaders that make up rules that change from day to day. 3 days ago, Scott Morrison told us everyone was going to have a needle. The next day he said, no one has to have a needle. We're not going to make it compulsory. The next day he says, if you're on welfare, you're going to get a needle. If you want to travel, you're going to get a needle. The day after, they're going to say we should be wearing something. The day after, they'll tell us something else again. Do you really want to keep listening to people like that? When Kano said one thing, never changed, did it?
Yeah, that's what it was.
That's what it was. Never changed. Auntie Bev told us something. She never changed it, did she?
Mm-hmm.
She stuck by what she said all the time. If you want to be led by someone, make sure they tell you the same story all the time that never changes. And if it ever changes, do one thing, walk away. And what people should be doing right now is walking away, because this is rubbish. What's happening now and the way the world's working right now, it's not working. It's made us fearful. And remember what the great line from your favourite movie is, Evan. June, what is that line?
Fear is the mind killer.
Thank you, Evan. And right now, our minds are being killed with fear. And you know what? If your minds are filled with fear, then when the change comes, you won't be part of it. You can't be. If you get caught this time, you've got to go to another planet and start again and get it right again. You've got too many lessons you haven't got right. So anyway, we'll talk more about that on the day. And thanks, Rose, for doing this. And of course, thank you, Valerie and Lea, as always.
Yeah, thank you.
And unfortunately, I shouldn't have said that. Valerie will be on this particular one, but Lea can't be, because we can't have two people doing the same story each time. That wouldn't work. But for those who are disappointed about that, don't worry. Lea will be back for our international edition with Michael Tellinger and Klaus Sturner and Dr. Rita Louise. And she'll be talking more about her friends from up there and also here at the same time, because they're not all up there. Some are with us right now. So they'll both be back and telling a wonderful story about the truth. And that's what this is all about. So thanks, guys. And I assume we are finishing up now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Rose. Yeah. Well, you've got to finish it. You've got to wind it up, Rose. I shouldn't be doing that. That's your call.
That was great. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you guys again for participating.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
Very lovely. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next chapter for the event. And yeah, so hopefully all the best for that one, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely. And the next one is going to be completely different. We've got a surprise guest that's known around the world. And Lea doesn't even know about it yet, does she?
I do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone's seen him on TV many times. He's been
yeah, I don't watch that show though. That's the thing.
Well, maybe you better start watching it and get to meet this guy, because you're going to meet him a fair bit. He's going to be very much a part of this.
All right.
You better start watching him a bit, because he's a wonderful human being who spends his whole life trying to help other people, and he'll lay his life down for another person to save them. And people like that, we need to listen to them. But that's all I'm going to say about him. He's coming up in our next presentation. I only got him locked in yesterday, didn't I? Only got him locked in. People from all over the world know this guy, and because of that, they may listen through him. So it's going to be a great way to break into mainstream, because that's a lovely channel we've got coming up. But that's down the line. I might try and what I might try and arrange, Rose, is we might do a couple of interviews, and one will be with him, and we'll get you to be part of that. But you don't know who he is yet, but I can tell you he's quite well known. Everyone in Sydney knows who he is, and everyone around the world has seen him at some stage, haven't they?
Yeah, they have.
It's one of the most popular TV shows in the world.
Yep. Right.
And he's one of the main people in it. That's all I'm prepared to say. There's a wallaby outside right now. We'll go and watch the wallaby. Okay, well, we'll talk. That's for next time. That's for next time round, Rose. And I'm only going to do 2 interviews with him, but one will be with you, and then we'll do someone overseas where it'll be different. But we'll get him on for sure for you, because we owe you something there. Mm-hmm. That's one way to pay you back. But you don't know who it is yet, but you'll find out soon enough.
Okay, all right. I'm excited. All right, thank you. All the best for your event then, and yeah, thank you again.
Okay, all right then. Okay, see you guys, and we'll see you next, and we're going to have a break. Okay, see you later. Bye-bye. Right, so how do we do this now? We turn it off, or?